Hi again, everybody, and welcome for a little bit more on the APBA boards, on whether these are deadball boards or not, and exactly how these work. So we talked about yesterday was the fact that not all of the power numbers are the same across every base situation. Now, Robert Henry should have known that. I think he forgot. I don't think he was looking closely at this, and I think that as soon as he found that Clifford Van Beek was a teenager when he created the game, that he just sort of passed him off and said, this is a kid's thing. This isn't really that important anymore. Now, when it comes to Clifford Van Beek and when it comes to APBA, I will tell you that not just among Robert Henry, but among other people in the APBA journal, there's this sort of like anti-Clifford Van Beek sentiment that goes around. In other words, what happens is people simply cannot believe that this person who was like a grocer in Green Bay was able to come up with something so complicated. You see this in the end of the APBA journal, right? So in the final years of the APBA journal, for some reason, certain people who I will not name decided that they were going to go find the old Fanitis game. Fanitis was a baseball game from like 1911, 1912, something like that, in which you took two dice and you rolled them and came up with some sort of result. There were no player cards. There were no boards at all. The boards, the results would vary from situation to situation, but they claimed that Fanitis must have been the original APBA game because you had two dice that were combined to form a number APBA style instead of added together, right? Which is completely ridiculous, right? But there is this bias that keeps coming out and that comes out in the community today that basically says that Clifford Van Beek couldn't have created the game on his own, or he must have created a very simple game that J. Richard Seitz, then expanded upon greatly and turned into what is actually APBA. Neither of those sentiments are correct. We just saw in the last video that Seitz took the power number results directly from National Pastime without altering them at all. Now, you might be wondering why in the world J. Richard Seitz would do that. Why would he not alter things? Why would he not change it? If Robert Henry is correct, why does Seitz not know that, we need to change this around because there's not so many triples in baseball anymore, right? I know there's been criticism in the APBA journal back when it existed. There had been criticism for decades about, the numbers 3 and 4 don't appear on cards anymore, and these are just sort of like ornamental. They don't really mean anything. Where is this gone? How come this doesn't exist? And so on and so forth, right? The truth is that there's a method behind the madness, and I'm going to show you a little bit of an insight into why things didn't change. So, as I mentioned last time, the important thing to keep in mind about how National Pastime works is that it's all about the boards and it's all about the base situations. Now, when we take a look over here again, so here's that Robert Henry pose. We're going to go away from Robert Henry for a second. We're going to take a look here at Baseball Reference. This is something that Clifford Van Beek could not have had, and something that J. Richard Seitz we know definitely did not have. What we can find on Baseball Reference is we can go take a look into the league information for, say, the 1930 National League and American League, and we can go look at batting splits. So let's see if I can find it here, league splits. When we look into batting league splits for the National League, what we see here is this interesting column called bases occupied, where we see bases empty. There are so many at-bats. Here's how everybody hit. Runners on first, second, third, first and second, first and third, second and third, and first, second, and third, right? That's the way that the game works, right? You have these base situations that come up, and you try to make sure that the base situations come up a realistic proportion of the time, and then the game is geared around those base situations, right? Once you know that this is happening, and assuming that you have the running game and the base runner being thrown out game and all of this tailored right, you can replicate these situations the way that they were in real life. What that allows you to do, once you know the general probability of how much one of these situations comes up, is that allows you to have these different power numbers as a fine-tuning mechanism, right? Again, this is not about the dead ball era. This isn't about, there were more triples than home runs, or guys like triples more, or base runners ran further, or they didn't run as far, or anything like that. It has nothing to do with that. Robert Henry was completely off base. It has everything to do with using these power numbers as a fine tool mechanism to try to get numbers in the long process of a replay that are close to real life, as close as we possibly can. That's the way that it works. Again, we'll look at the American League. I'll show you again how to do this. If you want to check it yourself, go over to batting in the 1930 American League team statistics and go over to league splits. And you scroll down to league splits, and here it is. This didn't exist. Like I said, this did not exist in 1930. There's no way that There's no way that Clifford Van Beek had any access to this at all. I mean, today it's not even that easy to find. And as you can see here, you don't have any sort of percentages. So what we do is we pull out LibreOffice Calc, or you pull out Microsoft Excel. You take all that information, you put into a spreadsheet, you pull it over here, and what you get is plate appearances for the National League and American League. Add them up, get the total number of plate appearances given all of these situations, and then look at the percentages. And here we have 50.6, 20.7, 8.82, 3.7, 7.07, 3.79, blah, 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 right? And that will tell you exactly what proportion we're looking at. Now, thankfully, on the Skeetersoft boards, somebody has calculated the percentage of the time that these situations come up generally when you're playing APBA or when you're playing National Pastime. And what we'll see, even in APBA, even though the poster says this isn't exact and site's got this and that wrong, we can see that he's almost exactly right. I mean, we look at this, base is empty, 52% versus 50.6% is very close, 21% versus about 21%, 9% versus that's about 9%. Just about right. They're saying, oh, well, so this is what the master game. Oh, well, this could be lower in basic APBA. Maybe runners in first and second doesn't appear often enough. Runners in first and third is a little bit, or it's not often enough in APBA. This is too high in APBA, right? But other than that, we are almost exactly on. In fact, when we click here to view full message, and we'll see that there are other people who calculated this, we will see again that the numbers hit almost exactly. And the funny thing is that in the history of baseball, if you go through these numbers, you will see that these numbers also don't really change. That's interesting. Okay, so this is the 2001 season, right? And we can see, well, bases empty was maybe a little bit more frequent. Base runners in first was a little bit less frequent. Again, I mean, we're talking about very, very small differences in percentage and very, very small numbers. APBA is going to be good enough to get it just about right. Right, here's from the Ed Zach book, which is a reprint from the June 1985 APBA Journal. I've seen this article. I actually haven't read it yet. And this is sort of what the Robert Henry and Bob Schumacher are calculating. Regardless of how right or how wrong it is, this is so close to real life that it's actually kind of scary. All right, so the reason why I bring that up is in part to show you that the old national pastime system actually works. In other words, that this is a system that even to this day can accurately reproduce baseball. Not only does the system work well, but the system's almost magical in the sense that it will reproduce, if you play correctly, it will reproduce these on-base situations in extremely, extremely realistic manner. In other words, you're not going to see in real life is what, 2.3% of all plate appearances happen with the bases loaded. If you're playing National Pastime, the game that has no pitching grades at all, no way to stop guys from hitting, you're still not going to see the bases be loaded more than about 2 to 2.5% of the time. You won't. It won't be over 3%, that's for sure. Same thing with runners on second and third. It's not going to be over 3% of the time. Right? That's the way that the boards were designed. You have to think about the boards like that. It's not an attempt to reproduce the dead ball era of baseball. It's not. It never was. It's an attempt, rather, to come up with a very fine-combed, like fine-tooth, very, very specific way of allocating power numbers and allocating certain results to certain hitter cards. And the system works brilliantly. It works very, very well. And it worked well in 1930, and it works well today. Now, you have to make sure that your cards are calibrated correctly. But if you do it correctly, if you calibrate the cards right, everything turns out right in the end. And the funny thing is, I don't believe that Skeetersoft NPIII largely deviates from those 1 through 6 results either. Though before I write my blog post, I'll probably go through, take a look at that, and we'll do a little bit of comparing as well. Anyway, I hope you learned something from this today, right? That's sort of the magic of this. I don't think anybody can really figure out how it is that Clifford Van Beek knew this and how he was able to calculate this, right? Because to get as close as he got with his boards, he would have to know like this sort of number. He would have to know about how often guys are really thrown out on the base paths, which is something that we don't even keep track of today. He would have to know a lot about base runner advancement, another thing that we don't keep track of today. I mean, this is the sort of thing that I would challenge that even your best baseball computer games, i.e. OOTP, Diamond Mine Baseball, and so on, have a real hard time coming back and recreating realistically. Right? This is an amazing thing for him to do in 1930 or before 1930, back before there were computers and back when we were probably using slide rules to make these calculations. It's remarkable and needs to be recognized as remarkable, and we really need to stop trying to pretend that this guy copied somebody else's game. Clifford Van Beek created the game on his own. Nobody made it before him. We know a lot about old games. His game is the most obscure, probably the most obscure baseball board game in history, and yet he got all of this exactly right. That's it for me today. I'll talk with you later. Bye.